Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Center podcast. I'm Emiliya Zhivotovskaya, your host and founder of the Flourishing Center. We are training the change agents of the world and equipping them with research-based tools for healthy, happy, and successful living. And we're so grateful that you're here.
This episode is a practitioner profile, where we highlight ordinary people that are doing extraordinary things. Each practitioner is a graduate of the Certificate in Applied Positive Psychology program from the Flourishing Center. Find out the exciting ways that people are putting the science into practice in their work and how they use positive psychology in their lives with individuals, organizations, and communities to help them thrive.
Thanks for listening, and let's dive in. Hello, everyone. With me today, I have Shelley Tupper, who's an executive in the communications business with the organization Pine Rock. She's also a leadership coach that integrates positive psychology into her practice. She is currently joining us from New York City. And some things you might not know about her is that, firstly, she's a wannabe storyteller who says that every once in a while she comes up with some gems and some jewels, which I think is more than just once in a while. But this woman has had a fascinating story. And despite all of the stories that she tells, many people want to know about the story of how she came to work at and some of her experiences of working at Studio 54. So maybe some of that will come out. And maybe there was some positive psychology happening at Studio 54 all those years ago. Maybe, maybe not. But Shelley, we're excited to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Oh, thank you, Emiliya. I'm delighted to be speaking to you today and to participate. I've gotten so much from the program that the minute you asked me, I was jumped at the chance to say yes.
Awesome. So tell us about your story. What brought you to communications? What brought you to positive psychology, to working as a leadership coach, your interest in storytelling, your background in the entertainment side of life?
Sure. It's interesting. The other day was International Happiness Day because it reminded me of how I first got introduced to positive psychology. I had been a coach in the early 90s, back when nobody really knew what coaching was about. In fact, a lot of people initially, when I said I was a coach, thought there was something, strange at that time. There just weren't a lot of coaches out there. It was so new. And I had decided to go back and get recertified as a coach, which I did a number of years ago. And I was listening to the news, and there was, I suppose it was the first time they were celebrating International Happiness Day, or there was a whole story that I was just hearing out of the corner of my ear, if you will, just slightly around happiness. And I thought, that's interesting. I wonder if there's a way for me to integrate happiness into coaching. And so I started to investigate and learned about your program, which I got involved with. And so that's how I came to know about positive psychology, just through research. So I decided, once I learned about the program, I got involved at the first chance. And I think that I was in CAP 13, which was several years ago, when I know that you're now, at 70 something in terms of CAP. Yes. It's amazing. It was only a few years ago. So you've been very busy, and I'm excited about that. But I'm generally a very happy, upbeat person. But I know as a human being, it's not always easy to be that way. And certainly in the world that we live in today, I feel there's a huge need and desire for learning ways to be happier, to manage the stresses of one's job or everyday life. And the things I learned have been amazing on multiple levels, both professionally and personally. But my story is I grew up in New York, and I've been working for most of my life in most businesses have been related to communications, like the company that I work with now. What I'm most excited about is that now I'm also able to manage coaching along with my work at Pine Rock. And I'm working with some of our corporate clients as well as clients that I have outside of my profession, and able to integrate positive psychology throughout, like I said, both professionally and personally. And it's made such a huge difference.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think as our listeners tune in, I think sometimes people wonder, what happens in those executive coaching sessions? What kind of things do people get coached on? What are the topics that leaders would say, hey, help me do this. I want to grow in this area. So what would you say are some of the themes that you work with the most?
Oh, that's a great question. All kinds of things. I think one of the ways that has enabled me to actually get corporate clients are through existing relationships with people that I've had for some time in the communications business, where I would say most honestly, there's a level of trust that I've had really good, strong, trusting relationships with individual clients who have on many occasions confided in me that there's some sort of challenge that is taking place within their organization or within their team, whether it's how to manage a relationship or rapport with another coworker, another associate. Maybe their personalities are so different that they just find being so opposite. How can I work with this individual? So sometimes it's a more personal question that people want help with. Others really want to be recognized or acknowledged for the efforts and the hard work they're putting in, and would like to find ways to be noticed to move up within the corporation, or to be given an opportunity that maybe their boss or other associates wouldn't necessarily see them potentially as fitting into a specific role that this individual is looking to get into, because it's not what they've done before. So people that want to take risks and try something completely new. And some people really want to find ways to stick within the company that they're in, but are in general feeling like their life is in their corporate world is very stagnant, and they need to have a complete turnaround in attitude. So those are some of the things that have been that I've heard most recently from clients.
That's beautiful. And where do you see positive psychology supporting those individuals?
Oh, it's a lot of ways. I think one of the things that I feel on a day-to-day basis is really around mindset. A question of whether someone has a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. And as human beings, a lot of us can find ourselves challenged by what's happening around us, where we get stuck, and it's either the type of language that we use, the way we talk to ourselves, or the way maybe others talk around us, that get us stuck in going down one path that leads us to really nowhere, to more being stuck, versus those that end up in a more growth mindset, being able to take on the challenges and find ways to overcome challenges. So that's one thing. Learning that was one of the first things that I learned in positive psychology. But I think that it's just simple, just making a little bit of a difference each day that I find makes not only a difference for me in my everyday life, but with executives that come for coaching or advice, that it's just taking a little bit of movement, just one little baby step towards a goal that they have. I think that makes a big difference. Little steps sometimes.
Beautiful. And I know that you also specialize in creating corporate experiences for people, and you've worked with so many different organizations. And we know that there's more of a push towards corporations asking, how do we create a positive organizational culture? How do we invest in the talent of our people and invest in their well-being. So I'm curious what you're noticing are some of the trends of how organizations are and maybe could continue to benefit from integrating positive psychology into what they're doing.
Oh, that's a great question. It's a very inspiring question too, because I think about this often when I'm visiting different clients' offices, and I hear in meetings when they're talking about their teams, their organization, be it their field force, their salespeople, or people that are in working cross functionally. How can we retain people? How can we make this the place that people want to be? And a lot of the companies that I work with are doing things in a very positive way. But sometimes they're very complex programs, and there are a lot of things that companies can do, with one-on-one coaching as well as group workshops that don't consume too much of their time, because I find that, often they're taking people off-site or investing in very intense programs that last full days or several days. And it's very hard to get people's attention for that long and to get them away from all their day-to-day tasks. But I think that investment, I haven't heard of a company that hasn't found the benefit or learned the benefit of investing in their people. I do think that there are ways to do it in a more simple way, with simple one-off workshops where you're just getting people to be creative. I love to do workshops that are around, creativity and actually creating a map for oneself. There's this whole philosophy around mind mapping and setting goals and working as a team, but there's a lot that I like to do around creative mind mapping and setting goals. That is a lot of fun and can be done in just a few hours.
I love that, because we all know that while you can have these wonderful experiences and these peak moments of people coming together and learning from one another, that we also want to explore how do we make that sustainable, and how do we create smaller experiences for people to continue to learn and to practice with one another. So exploring how smaller workshops can be a much more sustainable process, and that it doesn't have to be these large budgets that organizations create to be able to do this work.
Yeah. I know that you just made me think of something, Emiliya, because I often, through corporations, hire outside speakers. In fact, I've hired, we've engaged you before, and it was extremely successful for a women in leadership program. And there were so many people that came up to you afterwards having all these questions and just like a thirst for more. And there wasn't, in that particular case, follow-up. And I recently worked with someone through another corporation that he did a phenomenal job as a guest speaker. He was a behavioral scientist. He's fascinating. It's a lot to offer. And he really customized his presentation. But he also wanted to be able to provide more to the team. So that's something that, just as you're saying, I really feel that consistency of a particular message. If you're exposing people to something, it's great to have follow-up, whether it's follow-up a month or two later or an ongoing, quick fix. I like to do these coaching hacks with my clients where if they sign up to work with me, they know that they can touch base with me for short, quick fix, quick question, quick try this out, quick help. I'm called coaching hacks, like I said, that can be done in just, a 10 to 15 minute call. But I feel like there's a lot that corporations could do in thinking on a smaller scale, perhaps.
Yeah, because in our 5I model, you would fall under the umbrella of being an implementer, as well as being an inventor in the experiences you create, and also being an individualizer with the coaching that you do. However, we talk about there being two different types of implementers: people that implement within organizations as external consultants coming from the outside in. And I know that for our programming, we've seen some of the most successful companies be the ones who create an implementer from the inside out. So when they send someone to the program or to learn positive psychology from us that can do it internally. We know that it's the give a man a fish versus teach a man to fish. And when people have these things internally, it really gives this opportunity to keep the momentum going after these types of experiences. I also know, as you said, most people are really interested in your earlier life, your previous career. And I'm curious if you take us through a little bit of how did that all come to be and what did that teach you in terms of resilience and positive psychology and well-being?
Oh, that's a funny question. Well, I think resiliency, it was a long time ago, so I was quite young. So Studio 54 was really, I known as the most famous nightclub in the world, all over the world. Everybody wanted to get into Studio 54. I worked there for 3.5 years. I can't even believe that I lasted that long. I worked there for the second round of owners because now I'm aging myself. I was actually in high school when Studio 54 first opened. But it was one of my first jobs. I happened to know the owner of the club. He was a big hotelier. And I had originally answered an ad to be a waitress in St. Thomas. And eventually he bought Studio 54 from the previous owners, the original owners. And I went to work as sort of a party assistant. And I was there during the day helping work on parties. And I was there at night and spending a lot of time with celebrities, famous people of all walks of the fashion, music, entertainment business. If you give me a name of a celebrity, I probably have a short a story about it. But there is a story that I often tell, and it's about my 21st birthday. And I won't go into the whole story, but, I grew up in New York City, and my parents came to my 21st birthday party, and they were absolutely, their jaws just dropped, because Rick James was the guest of honor, and he came and sang me happy birthday in front of all my friends. And my parents could see through everything and just thought it was not really the place they wanted their child.
Not so high on health and well-being.
No, but what did keep me healthy, not only because I was quite young, is the fact that I danced a lot. I would start dancing, before things really got going. Every evening I danced. I loved to dance. I still love to dance, and I would dance a lot. So I kept healthy by moving an awful lot. That, and I think at the time, milk.
Shelley, what would you say are some of the biggest lessons that you learned when you were working there at that time?
Well, I learned maybe things that one shouldn't do that are not healthy, obviously. I mean, it was a nightclub. So it was actually when people could smoke in nightclubs. And I remember one of the reasons I left actually was I walked in one morning and the place just was so stinky. I thought, this place it's really a glorified bar. But one of the things I learned from the people there, I had really a blast. I met a lot of great people, and I hung out with some terrific celebrities. But there were some people that had this air of entitlement. And I could see them at their best, yes, in the public eye, never, privately, but at their best and at their worst at this club, for obvious reasons, because it was a nightclub. But this sense of entitlement was something that I really took away, was that just because they were famous or hugely wealthy, didn't entitle them to be rude and nasty. And it's something that stuck with me. If I ever find myself getting anywhere like that, I stop myself and say, that's not who you want to be in the world. And that goes true for any kind of negative attitude that, as a human being, you find yourself sometimes because you're stressed and you're in line at a bank or somewhere, and you've really got to go, and you're on a conference call or whatever happens. Sometimes I have to catch myself. But that was a big takeaway, because just because they were celebrities or, rich and famous, it didn't entitle them to be a certain way where they were rude to people or, not pleasant. So that was a big thing for me.
What a beautiful lesson to learn at such a young age. I can see how that would carry throughout your lifetime.
Yeah.
And the last question is, as you know, in positive psychology, we emphasize the importance of self-care. Our motto is self-care is healthcare. What are some of the practices that nourish and support you?
There's a lot of things. I think the things that most, first of all, having been a part of the program, because while I don't remember every single detail of what I learned, because it's been a couple of years, one, I stay in touch with you and the Flourishing Center to, be able to get involved in different programs that you've offered since then that I've taken. But it's sometimes just as simple as stopping doing what I'm doing for a mindful moment. And sometimes 1 minute can make a difference of just calming myself down and taking some breaths. And no matter how busy I am, I can spare a minute. But some of the other things, and one that really stands out is gratitude. Whenever I've practiced gratitude, and I've done it where I've practiced it at night to think of the 3 things that happened in the course of the day that made a difference for me. I've done it with my husband before we go to sleep at night, where we talk about both what we're grateful for, and the same first thing in the morning, especially on a day that's going to be very frenetic and very busy. It's just taking time to say, you can manage this, and be grateful and be excited about the things that are most positive. So it's looking to that mindset of a growth mindset, and what are some of the things that you can manage, and how can you manage them, and what is another way of looking at a problem or a stressful day or many challenges, and saying, I can get through this, especially when something not great happens. There's often times where our work is so crazy and so frenetic and multiple things are happening, and it feels like there's some fires going, and one can panic. And I used to do that all the time. I would do a little bit of a freak out when things would go bad. But through positive psychology, I stop myself and say, okay, what are we going to do? Let's all put our heads together. How are we going to manage this? And I think just knowing that you're going to be able to manage better by stopping and allowing your mind to look at what's possible in a positive way. I think that's a big thing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Shelley. And thank you for taking the time to enable us to learn more about your world and your life, and how positive psychology is supporting you and the individuals that you work with, and how corporations can begin to integrate these changes as well. Thank you so much.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for including me. I'm delighted to talk to you, and love what I've learned through the Flourishing Center and your program, Emiliya. You really have made a huge difference in my life, as you have with many, many people. I don't know if you hear that enough. I would imagine that you do, because you're so actively involved, but I do want to say thank you for all that you do, really and truly.
This Practitioner Profile episode is brought to you by the Certificate in Applied Positive Psychology program, the world's fastest growing practitioner training, with over 15 programs running every year in 5 cities and online internationally. Discover how you too can turn your passion for well-being, science, and helping others into a career where you help people thrive. Learn more about how you can become a certified positive psychology practitioner at getcertifiedinpp.com.
Thanks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. I want to encourage you to tell us, what would you love to hear more about? Is there an area of positive psychology you would love to get some more information on in terms of the research? Give us a shout out at info@theflourishingcenter.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I wish you a wonderful flourishing day.